Alright, well, it's time for another PBR with Nate. Cheers to you. Man, that's good after a day of work. Okay, so I had something on my mind pretty much all day. This sort of started last night or the last couple of days or so, and then it sort of really revealed itself this morning. I get it stupid early in the morning because I'm old and I got arthritis. Well, I won't say I'm old, because some of you who are older than me will say, well, you're not that old, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I got arthritis, so after I get up in the morning, I got to take my leave, I got to take my glucosamine, I got to do this, I got to do that, in order to get the blood flowing through my joints, because I work with these every day, so I need them to be operating at, at least 50%, which sometimes I question whether it's even 50%, but nonetheless. But anyway, what's been kind of boiling on my mind is, a lot of what's on my mind here lately, and you've seen from what I've shared on this little video blog, or whatever the hell you want to call it, is the Constitution of the United States. And liberty, which goes back to the Declaration: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, concerning this impeachment stuff, I know this is very divisive. It's extremely divisive. There are people on this side that are just like, he's got to be impeached, he's got to go, and this, that, and another, and he's just this and whatever. And if you look back over his history, he's this and he's that, and he's done this and he's done that, and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got people on the other side going, no, I mean, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and blah, 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 whatever. This is my concern. And this is really what I believe. This whole impeachment deal is over. I don't believe, technically, President Trump is the one that's on trial. But what I believe most of all, above and beyond that, the real and honest, true trial here is that the Constitution is on trial. And where that really solidified the way I'm feeling is, like I say, because I wake up stupid early in the morning, is that, I get a chance to watch some things on TV. Normally I watch something that's not really, it doesn't really engage my attention, just enough to just, hey, it's some background noise or whatever. Or I watch, Fox and Friends because it's, or Fox and Friends first because there's going to be a good-looking woman on there or something. Whatever. But this morning I decided that, because I'd heard through the grapevine, I decided I would look up Professor Alan Dershowitz's argument before the Senate for, because he's part of the president's defense team. And I knew that Professor Dershowitz, who is a law professor at Harvard, by the way, some of you may know him, some of you may not. He's been in the news a lot for whatever reason. But I'd heard that Professor Dershowitz was going to give his argument, and I knew what it was going to be on, because Professor Dershowitz is decidedly not a Republican or a conservative or whatever you want to call him. Decidedly not. As a matter of fact, he's publicly stated that he did vote for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. He has pretty much always voted for Democrats, and he won't vote for President Trump should he be acquitted. He will not vote for President Trump coming up. He flatly disagrees with him on a lot of policy issues, so he will not vote for him. However, he has made the rounds, and he's sort of put himself in as far as public opinion goes, he's put himself in sort of a sticky wicket. Because he's defended the president, and not so much the president, not so much President Trump, but defended the office of the president throughout this whole thing. And so President Trump tapped him as to be part of his legal team. Whether you agree or not. So I decided, I'll look it up and I'll find it. And granted, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't go to law school. I didn't even go to college. However, one thing, I didn't even do that well in high school. But I will say this. There are some things in this life that I have been really passionate about for a long time. And it goes all the way back to high school and even before that, is I've loved history and I've really loved politics and the things that surround it. And the reason being is because those things are something that directly affect my life. Everybody says, well, don't talk about politics and religion, blah, blah, blah. Well, politics and religion are the things that most directly affect your life. So why not discuss it? But I digress. So I watched Professor Dershowitz, and he did exactly what I expected him to do, is he came from a purely constitutional argument. And he laid it out. I mean, he quoted Federalist Papers. He quoted all the way back to Andrew Johnson's impeachment. You have to understand, there have only been, including the current president, there have only been 3 impeached presidents. Donald J. Trump, William Jefferson Clinton, and Andrew Johnson. Now, I know you want to talk about Nixon, whatever. Nixon resigned before he could be impeached, so he was not impeached. So when we talk about this trial or any of the others, we obviously need to compare them to each other. Now, Dershowitz laid out the case that these articles have been brought forth, but they do not qualify under, what the Constitution says is for impeachment, which is bribery, treason, and other high crimes or misdemeanors. That's the language. And then, of course, he goes into it, and he brings out the Federalist Papers and Federalist number 65 and this and another, which that's on my reading list, by the way. I'm fixing to get that from Amazon. Get the Federalist Papers. I've read the Constitution several times. But the Federalist Papers is sort of a commentary and defense of the ratification of the Constitution. And the Federalist Papers, people, who is that? What is that? Well, it was, you had three of the people who were involved in that, Madison, Hamilton, and John Jay, wrote articles to the New York newspaper, and there's, I think, 80... Anyway, there's 80-something articles that were written to the New York newspaper, initially anonymously, but then obviously it was found out who wrote them later on, in defense of the Constitution and the ratification of it, and explaining Constitutional Congress, the arguments they went through, why this is here and why this is not here and blah, 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 and this, that, and another. And I know to some of you people out there, well, that's just not, it's too much for me, whatever. You have to understand, at the time, that was written in a newspaper to the common person who would pick up a newspaper and read, okay, this is why we need to have the Constitution. So, it was written for the common person. And so, I encourage everybody to not only read the Constitution, but do some research on your own to understand the Bill of Rights and to understand what it is, the law of the land. You have to understand the Constitution was written and the Bill of Rights was written not to limit your and my movement or the way that we do things, but it was to limit the way that government can tell us how we should move and enjoy the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, anyway, so he came to that. And this is what has been on my mind today. Is that, hold on, I have to, excuse me. Oh, wow. Had chili today. Excellent chili, by the way. My wife makes great chili. Nonetheless. So what has been on my mind today is regardless, and this was brought about by seeing Professor Dershowitz, who does not agree with the president on anything, just about it, stand up and give an impassioned case about the Constitution. This is what's been on my mind, is that if this type of trial can be brought forth against the most powerful man in the free world. Okay, we always talk about, well, the courts favor the rich, whatever else. We're talking about a billionaire who is the president of the United States. If this type of trial can be brought against him, what does that say about you or me and our lowly forms of existence? Throughout, look, I don't care what your feelings are towards our current president. I don't care if you like him. I don't care if you hate him. I don't care if you think he's a piece of crap or if you think he's the best thing since sliced bread. I really don't care. I have my own feelings about him. It is what it is. But I will say this, is that under the Constitution, under the Bill of Rights, we all have certain rights. So, during the sort of indictment phase of this, or whatever, the president was not allowed to have any counsel or any of their own witnesses brought forth, or they were not allowed to challenge witnesses. They were not allowed, as a matter of fact, he had several of those subpoenas. Everybody talks about, well, subpoenas, they call subpoenas, blah, blah, blah. He had several of those subpoenas that were actually under judicial review, which every single one of us has a right to judicial review of subpoenas. And especially when it comes to a congressional subpoena, when it's brought by a committee and not by an entire vote of Congress. It's a right to judicial review. Okay, I'm exerting my executive privilege, which is a major part of separation of powers, because we have 3 co-equal branches of government. Co-equal. So, if he exerts executive privilege, and they say, well, no matter what, we're still going to do that, then he takes it to judicial review under the federal courts, which they determine whether executive privilege is able to be used in this context or not. Which, if you go back to the Clinton impeachment, President Clinton exerted executive privilege with every breath that he gave. And I'm old enough to remember that. That was 1998. I was already a year out of the Army. I remember that. So I was a full-grown man who had been voting. But understand this, is that he exerted executive privilege, and then it was up to the courts, and the courts did state that the courts, as a matter of fact, knocked him down a lot on his executive privilege claims. However, he utilized executive privilege because he had that right, and it was up to the courts. So now, when the current president decides that okay, let's use executive privilege. As a matter of fact, John Bolton, we'll get to that later. We're going to use that and go under judicial review. That, we can't do that. We can't wait on the courts. We got to do it now. And then, as I think yesterday sometime, there was one of the impeachment managers was on, I don't know, Jake Tapper, Chuck Todd, whatever. Sit there and said, we moved forward because they were pressed on the subject about why didn't you continue to go through the course? Why didn't you continue to go through that? They ended up saying at the end of it was that we had sufficient evidence to vote and to bring this to impeachment. So you had sufficient evidence then. Now you want more witnesses. Whatever. Nonetheless, I say that way too much. Nonetheless, what? Anyway, maybe I need to just take another hit off of this. So good. Okay, so just to bring it back, is that if they can do this to this president, then what does that mean for you and I? Now they want to call witnesses. Now they want to go with hearsay. The Bolton stuff, yeah. Whatever. Bolton says he was there, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's vet that. Let's corroborate that with other people who were there. Let's vet it. Let's get depositions. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's drag it out. Let's just go in and let's drag it out. Or are you just wanting to have a gotcha moment? And by the way, in that New York Times article, there is not a single quotation mark from the manuscript. Whatever. We're just gonna, but it's hearsay. It's he said at this moment. So, but we're going to allow that in court. That's what we want in court. And that's what you want in court for you. You have to understand, this applies to you as well. This applies to me. So, they want to talk about a fair and impartial trial. Well, who is it supposed to be fair and impartial to? In this country, isn't it said that you are innocent unless proven guilty? I know people say until, but the presumption of innocence is always there. So it's innocent unless proven guilty. Because if you say innocent until proven guilty, then you all of a sudden have a presumption of guilt. Innocent unless proven guilty. So we went through the whole House thing. We had all these hearings where the president was not allowed to have any counsel, was not allowed to have any witnesses, was not allowed to question any witnesses, and even the minority party was not allowed to ask certain questions, and if they did breach that and ask certain questions, then the witnesses under those rules were not allowed to answer them. Come on, man. Seriously, we are talking about not just a president. Just because you don't like him, because he's a Cheeto, because he has orange hair, because he's married to a supermodel, because he said grab him by the hoo-ha, or anything else. But I don't care about any of that. Everybody in this country has the right to due process and is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. And that includes an impeachment trial. That includes anything. You know what? I didn't like William Jefferson Clinton. He was actually accused, when it came out in Ken Starr's report, it was actually 11 felonies that he was accused of that needed to be answered for. After the impeachment, he was disbarred in Arkansas. He actually resigned from the Supreme Court of the United States before he could be disbarred. He was brought under contempt by a federal judge. Let's see, what else? I mean, come on. However, during his impeachment trial, he was acquitted. So therefore, then that's it. Period. End of sentence. He was acquitted. Oh, and by the way, old Chuck U. Schumer, during Clinton's impeachment trial, which actually was a bipartisan impeachment, he argued against new witnesses. The House has brought this. Then they have enough evidence to. They have enough evidence to proceed. We don't need new witnesses. Now, it's different. Different party. Whatever. That shows you. That tells you a lot. And that's why I say this. The Constitution is on trial. Because I can tell you this. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is a power grab. I don't care who you are. This is a power grab. And if you do not agree with me on anything, if you hate Donald Trump, if you hate Republicans, whatever else, if you hate conservatism, whatever else, understand this. This is a power grab, and it's a way to take away your liberties. Your liberties. It's not a way to look at Donald Trump and say, you're fired. It's not that. This is a way to take away your liberty and my liberty and somebody else's liberty in the court system. Because this sets a precedent and puts more power in Congress, where there are 535 members who have 535 different opinions about how things should go. And who have those 535 members have about 100 people to each of them who are trying to get this, or who are trying to get that, or who are trying to get this, or who are trying to get that. And they are begging, and they're paying this guy off, and they're paying that guy off, and they're paying that guy off. This is a power grab, and it's set to limit the president's power. So now I ask you, let's say this. Let's say, I don't know, Bernie. He seems like to be the most popular one. Let's say Bernie gets elected. He gets his cabinet, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, one of them he fires one of them because he don't like the way they do it. And then they write a tell-all book on hearsay and this, that, and another. And then the next thing you know, we're going to impeach him because this. The Republicans say, I'm going to impeach Bernie because he's a socialist. Is socialism against the Constitution? Well, kind of is. But is his views, do they mean bribery, treason, and other high crimes and misdemeanors? No. I take you back to Andrew Johnson. A lot of you people don't even know who in the hell Andrew Johnson is. He was not a likable fella. A lot like our current president. Not a likable fella. A lot of people didn't like him. He wanted to fire one of his cabinet members for whatever reason. I can't remember now. I can't quote the history. Look it up. You always tell me to look it up, so look it up. Well, Congress goes and passes this law and says that a president can't fire a cabinet member without prior congressional approval. Well, he flipped them the bird and said, I'm going to do it anyway. And he did it. So they said, guess what? We got him. He broke the law. Well, guess what? And he was a Democrat. And Republicans, it was a party, it was a partisan impeachment. Guess what? He was acquitted. You know why? Because he didn't violate the stinking Constitution. Because he hires the cabinet. The cabinet serves at his pleasure. That includes Secretary of Defense, Secretary of, Department, Attorney General, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, blah, 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 all the way on down to Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Education, blah, blah, blah. He has the right to fire any of those people, including the ambassadors, including the FBI director, including any of those, because they serve at the pleasure of the president. So now, if they are not there to help promote the current president's policies, then guess what? You're fired. So what's the big deal? And you talk about some sort of quid pro quo. You talk about this, you talk about that. Let me ask you a question. Even taking into consideration the revelation of, the alleged revelation of John Bolton's book. I got to drink before I say this. God. Now, he said he was there when he talked about you got to have at least an announcement of investigation into the Bidens. Okay, let me ask you this question. Was there an announcement by the Ukraine concerning the investigation of the Bidens? Was there ever a public, worldwide announcement? Was there ever that announcement? I'll wait. I'm impatient, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer. No. Now, was money withheld from the Ukraine past 55 days? Again, I'm impatient. No. Did President Trump release a full transcript of the phone call between he and President Zelensky? Yes. Yes, he did. During President Trump's first year and second year in office, was money given to the Ukraine on schedule? Yes, it was. Now, I know when I bring this up, people are going to say, well, he's not president anymore, so you can't even quote him. It's kind of apples and apples. I mean, we're talking about the Ukraine, we're talking about presidents, we're talking about money. During the previous president's term, President Obama, he never gave any money to Ukraine, even while Russia was literally invading them and annexing Crimea. Our current president withheld it for 55 days, citing, hey, let's check into this corruption stuff. And you know something else I've heard? Biden might have something to do with that. So let's check into all that. I'll tell you what, here's my attorney general. We'll funnel it through that. Let's go through legal channels. So come on, man. Seriously? But I digress, because a lot of you are now, oh, that's all he's going to talk about. No. It's your constitutional rights that are on trial here. It's the Constitution of the United States that is on trial here. And that means your rights are on trial here. And that means that whatever they do here directly translates to you. And get this, my Democrat friends, let's say that, okay, 2020 turns out to be Bernie, or turns out to be Biden, or turns out to be, I don't know, Pete Buttigieg. And the Republicans are like, we don't like that guy. Obstruction of Congress, abuse of power. What are you going to say then? And then he's not given any rights. They treat him or her, the exact same way. They treat them the exact same way. What are you going to say then? That's why I said the last time I gave my treatise on this Second Amendment and the stuff that went on in Virginia, which the Virginia lawmakers did, it just turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to what the people wanted. But I'll say this to you. Professor Dershowitz put his reputation and everything on the line when he stood up there and defended the current president, and actually defended the presidency, the separation of powers, and the Constitution of the United States. And now he will be vilified. Because he did that. I say to my friends and my family and you people out there who actually believe in liberty, regardless of your thoughts of the man, regardless of your thoughts of the office or anything else, will you stand for the rights that you and I have? Will you stand with me? I stand with you. I believe this stuff. You know what? Sometimes I get emotional or this, and I feel like this, or I feel like that, or I feel like, oh, this little, we need health care over here, blah, blah, blah. But I have to understand that every time that I give, that I relinquish more of my liberty to the government, it's like, give them an inch, they take a mile. And they will. And that's what they're trying to do now. 535 people who have 535 different opinions, who are obliged to know telling how many hundreds of thousands of lobbyists are trying to take that power and are trying to control you and your liberty. So I say to you, regardless of your political leanings, regardless of your hatred or love for the current president, pay attention to what's going on. Read your Constitution. Do what it takes to understand your Constitution.